When you travel, you want luggage that is durable and makes packing and getting around effortless. That's why luggage from Briggs & Riley is a wise purchase for all your travel needs. Plus, Briggs & Riley has the best lifetime guarantee in the industry. If your bag is ever broken or damaged, they'll repair it free of charge. Briggs & Riley is award-winning luggage, including Best Carry-On by Forbes, the Buy-Side Wall Street Journal, and Wirecutter. Their luggage has smooth, shock-absorbing wheels for easy navigation on any terrain. Visit Briggs-Riley.com.
Holiday magic is in the air, and DSW's got all the shoes to make your season extra merry. Believe, you've got parties to attend and lists to check twice, so DSW is taking care of the details, like gifts to make their eyes all aglow, styles that bring joy to your world, brands everyone wants, like UGG, Nike, Birkenstock, and more, and deals to make your budget bright. Find the perfect shoes for you and yours at a DSW store near you or DSW.com.
It's time to get in the zone. Time to get in the zone with the 49ers web zone. This is the No Huddle Podcast with Al and Brian.
'49ers Web Zone No Huddle Podcast. We are part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Al Sacco with Brian Renick. I know what you're all thinking. I know what you all wanted to hear when you started to listen to the show. Al, did you make the fantasy playoffs and how'd you do? I did in my non-dynasty league, and I had a big win, Brian, because Joe Burrow, Terry McLaurin, Justin Jefferson, James Cook, James Conner kind of carried me. The rest of my team did not do well, but I got the victory. Now,
attaboy.
2 games left. If I win one of the next 2, I win money in this league. And obviously, if I win this week, I'm in the first or second, top 3 gets money. So I'm excited about it. Did you make the fantasy playoff?
I did. So again, I have one league that I care about. It's just a league with friends and family. No money or anything. But the top 4 make the, make the championship playoffs, if you will. I was the 4 seed. So I went up against the 1 seed. But because we only do the top 4, the first week of the first round of the playoffs is 2 weeks, and then the second round is 2 weeks. And so this past week was the second week, and I beat the 1 seed, 301 to 244, largely on the strength of last week. It was largely on the strength of, randomly enough, Brian Thomas Jr. was a big contributor last week with those 2 touchdowns. Who would have thought that he'd be a better fantasy player with Mac Jones as his quarterback than Trevor Lawrence? But here we are.
Yeah, I should have taken Brian Thomas instead of Xavier Worthy in my dynasty league. And I really wanted Brian Thomas. I didn't think Worthy was going to be there, and I was going to take Thomas. And then the whole Chiefs thing, I'm like, I'll take Worthy, but I'm kind of regretting that now. Yeah, Brian Thomas is a good player. And you have Justin Jefferson too, right?
I do. I have,
which was the best 8th pick of all time for me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a strong team. So now we start the 2-week match for the championship. And I've got Baker Mayfield. My 3 quarterbacks are Baker, Kyler Murray, and Jordan Love. I've played Murray a couple times. I've played Love a few times. Mayfield, I think, has been my starter most of the season because he's been playing really well. But I've got Mayfield, Alvin Kamara, Kyron Williams, and then my wide receivers are Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, and Brian Thomas Jr. Tight end is Kate Otten.
Top 3.
Yeah, my flex is James Conner, who had a big game. My defense is the Chargers, and then my kicker is Brandon Aubrey. The rest of there's really no one else. My bench is pretty bare, but yeah, it's a pretty solid group.
I have Kate Otten too. I have Kate Otten and Jake Ferguson, and I love Jake Ferguson when the year started, but now with Cooper Rush, he's not doing much. And I feel like I have a tight end problem because Otten has fallen off, and that's going to hurt me. Because in our league, I feel like every time I play somebody, they score 160 points, and I got to outscore them. So it's it's going to be touch and go, but we'll see. So we'll see, man. It's going to be a big fantasy week, and the Niners suck, so I need something.
I would say this is a perfect example of where the 49ers are. Is that we start this show off with fantasy football because it's more interesting.
It's going to be a long couple months. I'm watching the 1:00 games, and this will eventually lead me into a 49ers thing and a Purdy thing. There was so much bad football and so many bad quarterbacks. And I made a list because I have a show to do. We have a show to do. So I made a list. I took some notes. and this is what I wrote down. These are the quarterbacks that I think kind of sucked this weekend, or just kind of suck in general. I wrote them all down. So you have the Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle with the Giants, which, I mean, come on. The ghost of Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones. Bryce Young has been playing better, but he sucked this weekend. Jake Haener, whatever he's trying to do. Kirk Cousins looks done on top of done. Kirk Levis, Will Levis, and Kyle Rudolph.
Will Levis is benched now, by the way.
He had -5 fantasy points, by the way. That's how bad he was. Jameis Winston, atrocious against the Chiefs.
Also benched.
And then DTR coming in after him doesn't look too good. I thought Tua single-handedly lost that game for the Dolphins, and he almost killed the guy because he let him into whatever, he was terrible, just throwing awful interceptions. Anthony Richardson, 47% completion, just can't even complete the ball. Geno Smith has not played well this season. And you think, oh, well, Geno's got to be better. And then you see Sam Howell come in and play. Looked like he had never played. If you woke up from a coma and you watched Sam Howell play in that game, you'd be like, they got that dude out of the stands, right? He's never played.
What I think is funny is they traded for that guy.
He just froze. Like, I think he took a sack in four out of five plays. He just dropped back and froze, like five dropbacks in a row. Desmond Ridder, horrible. Caleb Williams does not look like he knows what he's looking at out there. A lot of open receivers. He's freezing. He's overthrowing people. He could get better, but not good right now. Cooper Rush is doing okay for a backup, but he's not somebody you tune in to watch. He is not someone I would say is a good quarterback. Russell Wilson, I think, is cooked, even though they've been doing well. Kyler Murray is in his second half swoon. I just named you 16 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Right there. 16 that I think are right now are rough. So as we're talking about Brock Purdy and the contract, and there's a lot of back and forth with this Purdy stuff. Now things are starting to come out now. Do you notice that? A little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah. Greg Papa saying things.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you hear that Purdy's agents, he needs top tier money. Things are starting to come out, man. So couple thoughts. We're going to talk about, again, we just named all those teams with bad quarterback situations or maybe situations you don't want to be in. That's 16. There's 16 teams left, and I did not name Brock Purdy in that. We'll talk about that. And also, but let's start with this, I guess, because you have this back and forth starting right now. Yeah. Do you think this is just your regular, I'm going to say this, we're going to say this, we're just going to do a little bit of posturing, or is this the start of another just dysfunctional tear your hair out offseason for the Niners in a contract negotiation?
I'm hard pressed to think that it's not the start of a tear your hair out offseason, because that's the type of off seasons that they've had when it came to signing their players to extensions. Now, the only time we've seen this regime extend a quarterback, it was after 5 games of Jimmy Garoppolo in 2018, and they signed him to, at the time, the biggest contract in NFL history. It was almost immediately eclipsed, I believe, by Matthew Stafford, like days later, but still when they signed it. But that also kind of spoke to where they were as a franchise. The fact that they weren't paying anybody else. So they massively front loaded that deal so that if he didn't work out, which eventually, he didn't, they weren't beholden to an albatross of a contract. They did that quickly, right? That was quick in the offseason, but also Jimmy Garoppolo was going to be a free agent. That was why they had to do it quickly. So we've never seen them negotiate with a quarterback that still has a year left on his deal. And so that has been the bugaboo for these extensions. They've been extensions for players that still are under contract. And so those extensions can get, dragged out. With Trent Williams, right? They had to get that done immediately because he was going to be an unrestricted free agent. So, there's not a whole lot that we can look at and say, apples to apples when we're comparing it. But I have to assume that part of the reason why this is coming out now is because they effectively ended their season on Thursday when they lost. And then not only that, but in that game, Brock Purdy looked bad, just flat out. He did not look good.
Bad game.
And, I was watching I watched a clip. Colin Cowherd, I've gotten so tired of him, but he has John Middlecoff on quite often, and Middlecoff is part of the Haberman and Middlecoff podcast. But he follows the Niners, and one of the things that he pointed out was not every quarterback is going to be the most physically gifted quarterback in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you can even look at former 49er quarterbacks, right? Like Joe Montana and Steve Young were never as physically talented or gifted as Dan Marino or John Elway, right? They just never were. Those were dudes that were more physically gifted. So they had to elevate their games in other ways, right? Steve Young had his legs, but also, masterful in the pocket, could read a defense. Same thing with Joe Montana, timing, accuracy, all of that, right?
Sure.
Big, what you need in the West Coast offense. And for the first season and a half, 2.5 seasons that we've seen of Brock Purdy, he's kind of been in that vein where you're like, okay, I mean, he doesn't have the strongest arm. He does, right? Like he's got limitations, but he throws with anticipation. He's accurate. He will throw downfield when it's open, right? But one of the things that we've seen this season is that some of that has gone, like his decision making has not been good this season. And Middlecoff made a point. I can't pay $55 million to a quarterback who's going to be a bad decision maker if he doesn't have the physical tools that can overcome those bad decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Like Josh Allen can make some bad decisions because he's got a howitzer connected to his shoulder, right? And so sometimes those bad decisions turn into good plays because he has the physical ability to do that. Brock Purdy, the second half of the season, and again, I think I do think there's something wrong with his shoulder. I don't think it's 100%.
I agree with that.
I tweeted out something, and a mutual of mine who has a big following. He's a physical therapist, Jeff Mueller. He quote tweeted it and said, "It sounds like he probably has a slight labrum tear, and if he has surgery in the offseason, it tells you that is what it is, like a labrum tear. At which point, obviously, he's not going to get enough mustard on the ball. But it's a scary proposition because, you look at Josh Allen, right, as an example. I read this tweet to you earlier before we started recording. The Bills are paying one offensive skill player, right? So not including Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. One offensive skill player more than $3.5 million a season, and that's Dawson Knox, the tight end, who's getting $7.7 million. And yet, they are arguably the best offense in the NFL this season. They've gone 3 straight games scoring over 40. I think they've gone 5 straight scoring over 30, and they have 10 different skill players with 200 plus scrimmage yards. That is a quarterback that elevates the talent around him. And I don't know that you can say that Brock Purdy is that. We don't know if he can be because he's been surrounded by a lot of talent, but if you pay him a large contract, $55 to $65 million in annual average value, it's going to be a lot more difficult to surround him with the type of talent that we've seen since he's been in the league. And that's a big gamble on somebody that doesn't have the physical tools that you normally look for at that position. Physical tools are not the be all end all. I know that. I understand that. And there are strengths to his game that will translate in the future, but it's still, to me, quite the gamble.
You mentioned his shoulder. Football players go through a season and nobody's healthy. And sometimes they get injured and they can't play. And sometimes they have bumps and bruises. And sometimes they're injured and they can play through it, but it affects them. We don't know how bad his shoulder is. We may find out at the end of the season if he does get surgery or just whatever. And I think that's the big thing here. That's the wild card here. If his shoulder is messed up, that may explain a lot. And now he had that great game against the Bears, who seemed like they pretty much packed it in, but he had a great game against them. So I think that led a lot of people to be like, oh, he's good. But
he wasn't thrown deep.
Right. Exactly. So it's not, he still didn't look, he doesn't look, not even that. I don't want to say he doesn't look, he's not doing the things that he did even 2 months ago, where
Right.
he's running around and chucking the ball downfield. So
Mhm.
I think he is physically limited right now.
Mhm.
But everybody lives in the moment. Everybody lives at what they see, and they have this contract looming over them. And they're like, well, this is what he's not good.
Right.
He's mid. He might be hurt. He might
Right.
be hurt. You have to look at him and accept that.
And they
His
would never
shoulder might
tell
be-
us.
Right. You're not going to know because they're not going to come out and be like, yeah, he's got a slight labrum tear. Because then teams are going to be like, all right, well, we really know
Right.
he can't throw deep, despite
Right.
what they're seeing
Exactly.
on film or whatever. Teams are not going to come out and tell you specifically about their players more than what they have to report on an injury report. They're not going to do that.
Right.
So this may be a situation where the Niners know and Purdy knows I'll be fine next year, but I just got to gut it out for the rest of the season. And nobody's worried about it, but the fans and the media are.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Whatever the adventure, there's a BMW engineered to take it on. The X3 delivers a striking design with agile performance. The 100% electric i4 packed with pure electric energy. Or the plug-in hybrid X5, an impressive, versatile SUV granting full control on every journey. Choose what powers your next adventure during the BMW Road Home Sales Event. BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Hurry in for exceptional offers through January 2nd. Visit BMWUSA.com for details.
Hey, it's Austin James. Yes, I'm living with diabetes, but it doesn't have to define me. Thanks to the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor, I get real-time glucose readings throughout the day. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor is small and easy to wear, giving me the freedom to focus on my life as a parent and a musician. Now this is progress. You can get a free sensor at freestylelibre.us.
Offer available for people who qualify. Visit myfreestyle.us to see all terms and conditions. Certain exclusions apply. Data on file, Abbott Diabetes Care, or prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Another thing I've been looking at, if you look at quarterbacks early on in their careers, and I found 4, probably more, but I was just looking at examples. I found 4. First year of starting. So not if they started 6 games their rookie year and whatever, their first full year of starting. Dak Prescott, 23 TDs, 4 interceptions, 104.9 rating. Year 2, 22 TDs, 13 interceptions, 86.6 rating. He did not play anywhere near as well in his second full year starting. And I remember thinking in year 2, oh shit, maybe Dak isn't that good. You cannot like Dak Prescott, but he was a top 5 MVP guy last year. He is a legitimate starting quarterback in the league. We're not talking about the playoffs, but regular season. Mm-hmm. He proved after year 2 that, yeah, he is a good quarterback. He just had a down sophomore year. Jalen Hurts, year 2 of starting, 22 TDs, 6 interceptions, 101.5 rating. Year 3, 23 TDs, 15 interceptions, 89.1. He was hurt last year in year 3. He had the knee issue, and he's played better this year. CJ Stroud is a rookie. 23 TDs, 5 picks, 274 yards a game, 100.8 rating. This year so far, 17 TDs, 9 interceptions, 232 a game, and an 89 rating. He hasn't looked anywhere near the way he did last year. Are you worried about Stroud, or is it just a sophomore slump adjustment thing? It's probably a sophomore slump adjustment thing. Lamar is the last one I'm going to give you. Year 2 for him, 26 TDs, 9 interceptions, 99.3 rating. Year 3, 16 TDs, 13 INTs, 87 rating. And obviously Lamar is like a video game right now. So this stuff happens to quarterbacks early in their season, early in their careers, where they have a year, whether it's because of injury or just adjustment or a little bit of both, where you're like, that wasn't the best year. Now with Purdy, as compared to these other guys, we don't know how he's going to bounce back. But if in his next season, year 3, his third full year of starting, which is going to happen and likely going to happen for the 49ers. Yeah. If he's healthy and looks like he did before, you're going to say, okay, yeah, it was a sophomore slump. It was an injury. That's all it is. We don't know. It's just this contract is hanging over everybody's head now. So you're like, oh, we can't pay him 60 mil. We can't pay him 50 mil. I hope he is hurt. Not that I want him to be injured, but just it would explain what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And then I hope as well that we don't get into this offseason. I don't want it to turn ugly. I don't want this to be another dysfunctional thing. I hope they come to some kind of agreement, 50 mil, whatever. But when you got Bob Papa on the radio talking for 3 minutes about how Purdy can't play when it's wet outside, he's a mouthpiece for the 49ers. He works for the 49ers.
Paid by the 49ers.
Yeah. And if he's going on the radio and saying that, to me, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, there's kind of like, I always feel like there's a little bit of, why don't you go out and just kind of put this out there type thing. So the Niners have leverage, and then Purdy's camp wants leverage. I just hope they just come again to just cooler heads prevail and common sense prevails. And they say, all right, let's do this deal. 3 years, 140 million, whatever, in that area. Structure it in a way where you can get out of it in a couple of years. That's what I hope. But yeah, we'll see. If he comes out, and this is me too, if Purdy comes out and he's like, I want 60 million, I want 65 million, fuck you. Because that tells me, like, dude, okay, you can believe in yourself and believe you're good. Well, now you're asking for a contract that's going to hamstring your team. And everybody knows you're not Josh Allen. Everybody knows you're not Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. And I hate the idea of that just the next guy with a contract should get paid the most. I hate that. But if that's where we are, maybe that's where we are. But again, I don't think it's going to be that way. Cooler heads are going to prevail. He's going to get a hefty contract, but I don't see it being 60, 65 million.
Yeah. And, Richard Sherman was on his own podcast today, and I saw a clip from it on Twitter. And basically he said this, the 49ers have two options. One, you move on from Brock Purdy. And then you have to ask, well, move on to what? To where? To who? Right? There's no one on the roster right now. They're not going to be in position to draft a quarterback in the draft. There may be some guys that become available, namely Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins. But let me ask you this. Who would you rather have, Brock Purdy or Kirk Cousins? My answer is Brock Purdy. And then who would you rather have, 100%. Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold? We've already seen that. We've already seen that in San Francisco. Yeah. Kyle Shanahan already chose Brock Purdy. So there's no reason why he would all of a sudden now choose Sam Darnold. He already chose Brock Purdy. So the question then becomes, well, who do you move on to? Where do you move on to? And, you and I were talking about before we started recording, and I said, unless you just genuinely like, and I wouldn't put this past Kyle Shanahan, but if you believe that this offense is always your system, it's your system that is the key, not the person running it, but your system, and that you can pretty much plug anybody in and find success. We've seen that with Jimmy Garoppolo. We've seen that with Brock Purdy. We haven't seen that with CJ Beathard. We haven't seen that with Nick Mullins. So there's a certain level of competency that you have to have. You can't just plug Joe Schmo in and call it good. So you can move on from Brock Purdy, but there's more questions than answers there. Or you can pay Brock Purdy. And the reality is this. If you choose to pay Brock Purdy, that contract starts at $55 million a year. Why? Because that's the contract that Tua signed. That's the contract that Trevor Lawrence signed. That's the contract that Jordan Love signed. And Brock Purdy can walk into that room and go, I've done way more than any of those three assholes.
Yeah.
In the 2.5 years that I've started, I've made it to 2 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. These guys haven't done
MVP.
Dick, right? And they're at 55. So no, you're not paying me less than these guys. And
that's fair too. And
to me,
he'd be right to say that.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And so that's really where we're starting is you're starting at $55 million a year. You have to, because you cannot pay Brock Purdy less than those guys that haven't done anywhere near what Brock Purdy has done. So can you meet in the middle and go, well, what if we give you $58 million a year in annual average value? Now you've beat those guys. You're not at 60. You're not at Dak, because that's a stupid contract anyway.
Right.
The Cowboys were dumb for giving him that. So you're not there, but we're not going above 60, right? We're not doing that because we've got questions. And if I'm the 49ers, here's my biggest question. If his shoulder is injured, I walk in that room and I say, you've had 2 throwing arm injuries in the 3 seasons that you've been in the NFL. That is scary. And that is where we need to make sure that we protect ourselves in case something like that happens again, right? Because what is the biggest what's the biggest way to tank a season is to lose your starting quarterback.
Right. He's not
It's
a big
the
guy.
easiest way to do it. Yeah.
He's
He's not a big guy. Yeah. But like I
have
said,
in my head,
your choices are move on or pay. But if you pay, it starts at $55 million a year.
Yeah, and I have in my head, can they do 3 years, 140, which is ridiculous. You're right. It's not going to happen because what you just said exactly, you're paying Tua $55 million. God, he's done nothing. You're paying Trevor Lawrence $55 million. He's really done nothing.
Can't win a playoff game.
Jordan Love, we'll see after the season. Who knows what he does? But at the time of his contract, he had one season and he lost to the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
He lost to Brock Purdy in the playoffs.
Through the game-sealing interception.
Yeah, I probably have this ridiculous. It probably is ridiculous to think that he's going to settle for 3 for 140. That's what I hope. That's what makes sense team wise, but that's not going to happen. It probably will
Jordan
be in the
Love
3 to 170, 175 range.
I say Jordan Love was 4 for 220. That was the Jordan Love contract, and it averages exactly $55 million a year.
Do you know how many years Tua and
I'm looking right now.
4 years.
Tua was 4. Tua was 4 for $212.4 million. So he's at $53.1 million. And then Trevor Lawrence is 5 for $275. So still 55. Same as Jordan Love. 55 AAV, just an extra year on top of that.
So Tua in Love got 4 years. So he's at least getting 4 years. Mm-hmm. You're right. Just market value for that.
Right.
It's insane. I mean, these quarterback contracts are insane. It's just, but again, I mentioned the 16 quarterbacks this weekend that played that sucked. And obviously Lawrence is hurt. Dak is hurt. So you have your other guys, Josh Allen, Lamar, Burrow, and Mahomes are alphas to me. Then you have Goff, you have Stafford, you have Baker, you have Herbert, you have Hurts, you have Love, you have Stroud. Obviously I mentioned Purdy here. They have the 3 rookies, Drake, May, Daniels, and Bo Nix, who I think have shown a shit ton in their rookie season. I'd be happy with all 3 of those guys if I was their franchise. And Darnold, like you said, Darnold's not going to go anywhere. Darnold's not playing anywhere for $15 million next year. Sam Darnold's getting paid. Sam Darnold has 29 touchdowns and 11 picks this season. His team is 12-2. If they make a run in the playoffs, if they win a couple games on top of it, he's getting a shit ton of money on the open market. So it's not like when people say, "Oh, we'll flip Purdy for what are you going to get Sam Darnold for $40 million a year?" You know what I mean? And Purdy for 50. Why would you even do that? Why would you make that change? So the same thing with Darnold. Darnold's had one season where he's looked good. So everybody all of a sudden and why do they say that about Darnold? Well, he's got a stronger arm. Well, he's bigger. All the things again that don't necessarily. Sure, it's good to have that stuff if you have the brain and the accuracy and the timing and everything else around it, which Purdy has had in the past. He seemed to until recently. And again, the shoulder thing to me, the more I think about it, it's in my head. There is something wrong there. I don't believe that we can judge him off what we're seeing, what's going to end up being the last couple months of the season, because I think he's playing through his shoulder injury. And if it's a torn labrum, I mean, come on, man. What do you? Of course, he's out there, right? He can't throw the ball down the field. So we still have to, there's still more of the story to be written or more to be read and found out or whatever than what we know.
Again, we'd have no idea what the contract that Brock Purdy is going to sign. But the one thing that we can guarantee is that whatever the 49ers do decide, it will benefit both team and player, right? In some type of way, unlike some of these contracts that we just talked about.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the new generative AI assistant from AWS. Many tasks can make business slow, like wading through mud. Help! Luckily, there's a faster, easier, less messy choice. Amazon Q can securely understand your business data to help you streamline tasks, like summarizing quarterly results or doing complex analyses in no time. Q got this. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
Future you faces some big expectations. Work out more, go to bed earlier, and most importantly, make smart money decisions. Thankfully, today you has Bank of America. One place with tools and guidance to help balance tasks from budgeting to saving. So you can just be you with big plans. Do more with a bank that asks, what would you like the power to do? Explore our tips and more at bankofamerica.com/futureyou.
Do you know what Dak Prescott's cap hit next season is for the Cowboys? So in 2025,
85 million.
It's 89.9. That's his cap hit. He has a base salary of 47.7 million, a signing bonus and a signing bonus was 28. His signing bonus was 80 million. So the base salary of 47.7 and then the proration of the signing bonus is 28.8. And there's a restructure from earlier that is prorated at 13.2 for a cap hit of 89.9, which is 32.89% of the cap for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, he's not playing on that contract. But I was even looking at Trevor Lawrence's deal, right? So again, this year was the last year of his rookie deal. And so his extension hits in 2025. But the way they have it structured, and again, this is what the 49ers would do. Trevor Lawrence's cap hit in 2025 is 17 million. It's 24 in 2026. And then it starts to get aggressive. It's 35 in 2027 and it's 47 in 2028. And then there's a potential out. If they don't exercise that out, which they will, his 2029 cap hit is 78.5 million and his 2030 cap hit is 74.8. And then there's a void year and there's a void year in 2031 and 2032. In 2031, that void year is a cap hit of $21 million. So again, all of these get restructured or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's just It's just fun to look at and see how, again, these contracts. And that's the thing is you're going to hear Brock Purdy is going to sign a contract and you're going to hear the details of the contract and you are going to shit your pants because you're like, oh my God, this is a massive contract. We're doomed, whatever. And then you're going to look at it and go, okay, actually, it's not as bad as we think. It's just like the Eagles with Jalen Hurts.
Right.
These contracts and it's so easy to manipulate. That's why I'm not super concerned about it. But the reality is you better be sure that he's your guy if you're paying him that level of money, because even though it's easy to manipulate, it still is going to mean that eventually the bill is going to come due at some point and it's going to hurt you.
Well, the Nick Bosa this is what I guess I'm trying to explain what's in my head here. I don't want Purdy. The 49ers are generally very good about not putting themselves in a bad contract situation.
Mm-hmm.
They usually structure these things well. If Purdy, I don't want to see Purdy put them in a situation where they have to go above what they want to, kind of what they did with Ayuk. And even with Bosa, who Bosa's cap numbers it was 14.6 million this year, 20.5 million next year, nothing for him. But then in 2026, 42 million, then 52 million, then 42 million. So there may be a restructure coming, but if not, you are paying him like a quarterback in 2026. Mm-hmm. That's the type of contract. I don't think the Niners wanted to do that. If they did, they wouldn't have waited until the day before the season or whatever it was. And I just want the same thing for Purdy. If Purdy holds them over a barrel, I'll be a little bit pissed because I think there's got to be, especially with quarterback, like you said, you could structure it in a way where you're still getting your money, you still get what it looks like on the surface, and it's structured in a way where you're not totally handicapping your team.
100%. And
we'll see if they can do that.
I know that his agent came out and said he wants to reset the market. It just doesn't. He just doesn't seem like that type of player, right? Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't want his money. He absolutely should. He's literally been the most valuable, using the term value meaning money, the most valuable player in the NFL over the past 3 seasons. Easily. The dude is making less than $1 million a year, and he's the quarterback of, the defending NFC champions. So I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve his money, and I'm not saying that he doesn't want his money, but I also don't think he's the type of player that's like, look, I'm going to hold out for every last red cent, regardless of whether or not it hurts the team. I just don't see it. And I could be flat out wrong, but he just doesn't strike me as that type of player.
We've been surprised before, dude.
100%.
And he cannot go into the negotiations. If this was after 2023, after that season, yeah, dude.
Sure.
Top 5 MVP. We made the Super Bowl. We almost won the Super Bowl. 2 comeback wins in the playoffs. But right now, you're talking his completion percentage. He's 17th in the league. Yards, he's 13th. Yards per game, he's 12th. Touchdown passes, he's tied for 19th. He's QBR is 65.2. That's 10th. His rating is 94.3. That's 15th. He's played mid this year. His numbers are mid this year. How are you going to go in and be like, reset the market with me? You know what I mean? So I feel like there's got to be somewhere met somewhere in the middle. You know what else I'm looking at? I want to just throw this out there. I just was looking at this before we went on the show. His home road splits this season. So he's at 8 starts at home, completion percentage of just under 62%, 6 touchdowns, 8 picks, and a rating of 81.1 at home. And on the road, 70% completion, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a rating of 115.1. I had no idea that it was that big of a discrepancy home and road this season. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason for it, but really crazy.
Well,
been that big of a difference.
I think part of it is looking at the road opponents. So he played Minnesota on the road. He played the Rams on the road. He played Seattle on the road. He played Tampa on the road, and he played Buffalo on the road. So, I mean, Buffalo game, obviously in the snow, that Tampa game, he played well. 353 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you take the Bills game out, his numbers must be insane in those other 4 then.
Well, and that's what's crazy. So if I'm looking, I'm looking at, so he had a 77% completion percentage against Minnesota, 73 against LA, 64 against Seattle, 69.4 against Tampa Bay, and then 61.1. So yeah, it's not, so they played the Jets at home, the Patriots at home, the Cardinals at home, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Seahawks, the Bears, and the Rams. It certainly seems like he's played the better teams on the road.
Yeah, right. That's
better.
A weird stat line.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, look, we're gonna find out. The only this off season is gonna suck again. I just want one off season where there's not drama and just this ridiculous bullshit that we have to listen to, but we're probably gonna be there. The only saving grace, I hope, is that it's done earlier.
At least they got the Lenore extension done.
Yeah, it's one thing they got out of the way. If this drags on into camp, I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm not gonna be able to take it. But
well, and the other thing to look at and look for is, again, the decision on Hufanga and Greenlaw, because both of them will be unrestricted free agents, which means that they're going to have to
make a decision maybe sooner.
A decision prior to the start of free agency. So we'll know that answer a lot sooner. And maybe their goal is to get the Purdy extension done as fast as possible, so they know what they're playing with for free agency and what they have for some of these guys that they would like to bring back. So that would, I mean, I guess here's the thing though, right? Brock Purdy's cap hit is not going to change next year, regardless of what what extension he gets.
Mm-hmm.
So what they have to play with next year isn't affected by the Brock Purdy contract, but what you would want, or what you would hope, I think, is to know what you're going to pay him long-term, so that as you look to sign other long-term contracts, you figure out how to structure those around what you're giving Brock Purdy. So again, you would hope and you would think that they would try and get it done as soon as possible. So again, it helps with the team building that they're going to need to do, because there's a good amount of it. There's a good amount of roster change, I think that we're going to see, and some revamping that will be needed if again they are looking to make a run at the Lombardi next year, because like I said, Greenlaw, Hufanga, they need to figure out how to revamp that defensive line. They need to figure out center and left guard. They need to get a second tight end. They got to find the successor to George Kittle.
Yep.
Ideally,
you eventually have to get somebody in there.
You probably have to bring in another wide receiver, probably not from the draft. You probably got to bring in a veteran, because Brandon Ayuk won't be available until midseason. Don't know if Deebo Samuel will be on the team, right? So there's a lot of work that they're going to need to do, and to have as much information as possible is probably going to be the route that they would love to take, which means that they get the Brock Purdy extension done sooner rather than later. They make the decisions on Greenlaw and Hufanga, and then they kind of hit the ground running and see what they do in free agency.
that Bosa contract's going to be, they have an out after 2026. So they have that huge cap hit, $42 million in 2026, and Purdy's number you would think would be lower that year. It's not going to be huge, but after that, there's a $16 million dead cap to get out of the deal, and he'll be 30 years old in 2027. That'll be interesting.
I don't think they have any. I would assume they wouldn't have any interest in exercising that out. I just think that what we're going to see is multiple restructures.
Yeah, they cannot have a $52 million cap hit from him.
No, and they won't.
That's insane.
They won't. Yeah,
they won't. It'll have to be a restructure there. So we'll see. Yeah. All right. Well, let's hope this isn't as crazy as we think it's going to be. But we've all seen this movie before. So all right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For Brian, I'm Al.
Later.
1, 2, 3. Hey!
2400 Sports is an Odyssey company.
The most wonderful time of the year. Although, let's be honest, around the holidays, things really add up. But here's the good news. Only at Verizon, you can get a single line for $50 per month when you switch and bring your phone. So while ice skating for two is definitely costing more, here at Verizon, you can save. Gifts for your third cousins? Steep. A single line with Verizon? Not so steep. A real tree? Pricey. A single line with Verizon? Less pricey. Flights to see Mima and Pops? Those are up. A $50 per month single line? That's down. Even a trip to the Atlanta Holiday Market will cost you more. But with Verizon, you can switch and bring your phone for just $50 per month for a single line on unlimited welcome, with autopay plus taxes and fees. All this to say, during the holiday season, when everything is costing more, you can get more for less right now at a local Verizon store. $15 monthly promo credits applied over 36 months with a new line on unlimited welcome. In times of congestion, unlimited 5G, 4G LTE may be temporarily slower than other traffic. Domestic data roaming at 2G speeds. Additional terms apply.